Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to One Cafe with Kevana or One Coffee with Kevana. I am New York City, and I have a guy here, which is we need to talk with him. He's Leel Sinai. He's the global president for Access, and he will go through all these details. But let me tell you a little bit about Access, and he will go deeper. This is the American Jewish Committee's Young Professional Division. We are talking about between 25 and 40, and they are empowering Jewish leaders to advocate on behalf of global issues facing the Jewish community. And I would like to say, welcome to the show, and thank you very much for being here, Leel Sinai.
Thank you
Hello.
for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Lil has a really nice story because he's not real American. But let's go to that place. I mean, why don't you tell us that story? Because it's a nice one.
Sure, absolutely. So, my parents actually came from Israel to America in the 1970s after the Yom Kippur War, and they were working for the Israeli consulate here in New York City. Wanted to make a better life for themselves and for their future children, and so I was born actually in Brooklyn, New York, the third of three children to my parents. And very shortly after I was born, we moved to Long Island, where I grew up. I grew up in a very Israeli home. I'm a dual citizen, both the U.S. and Israel. And my the culture that I was brought up with in my home was Israeli. All my parents' friends that we that we visited were either Israeli or some Polish as well, because my mother was actually born in Poland, and I grew up in a Hebrew speaking home. So Hebrew was my first language, and I still speak Hebrew with my parents and my family to this day. I actually learned English later on, both from my siblings and then also going to school and having to pick it up kind of on the fly. And so now English has become my strongest language for sure, because I work in English and speak English every day in my private life as well. But Hebrew is very important to me, as the kind of national language of the Jewish people. And so I make sure to keep up with it and speak with my family, and I'm very proud of that. And so not only Hebrew, but just being an Israeli American is something that's very important to me, and that is a really integral part of my identity. So I'm very Israeli when I'm in America, and I'm very American when I'm Israeli, and that's okay. And so both nations are very near and dear to my heart, and very important to me, and form an integral part of my identity.
So before we go to the formal issue about this show, so when you are in Israel, do you ask for a New York pizza or you opt for a falafel?
I try to stay away from the American food when I'm in Israel, just because I might as well take advantage, of being at the source of all the wonderful Israeli food that we try to get here in the States. So whether it's falafel or shawarma or whatever it may be, I indulge as much as possible when I'm in Israel, in the local delicacies, and I leave the pizza for New York.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the point, and we would like to explain to our audience what is access, and what is the important duties and job you are taking care of in this moment.
Sure, thank you. So, as you said earlier, Access is the Young Professionals Division of AJC. It's kind of post-college in America, so your early 20s to 40 years old. And Access basically provides a means through which young professionals can conduct the advocacy that AJC does in general. And so maybe I'll take a step back first and explain what AJC does, and then how Access fits into it. So AJC is it stands for American Jewish Committee. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that has a mission of three pillars. One is defending Israel's rightful place in the world. The other is fighting anti-Semitism and extremism and promoting kind of Jewish peoplehood around the world. And the third is promoting human rights and democracy. And so for those three missions, AJC does work in three different avenues. One is diplomatic, so that is working with consuls general, UN ambassadors, foreign ministers, etc., in the diplomatic space. The other is governmental and legislative outreach, so that's working with whether it's from the presidential administration all the way down through Congress at the federal level, and different agencies of the executive office, and also at the state and local level. So that's state legislatures in New York, let's say where I am, in New Jersey, and then the local legislators as well, like in New York City. And so the third one is working with kind of community affairs, as I call it. So that's intergroup and interfaith work. So that's work that AJC is doing to build bridges between other religious groups and other kind of ethnic or national groups in the US. So whether that's Christian or Muslim or different denominations of Christianity, or the Hispanic American group, AJC is building bridges because we know and others know that you can't be insular when you're trying to take care of your community. You have to build allies, right? You have to help others and others help you. And it's through that we can effectuate real change, both in the US and around the world. You can't kind of operate in a vacuum or in an isolated manner. So, it's important to note that AJC is not a lobbying group. It's really a bridge building group, and it educates the diplomats and the legislators, and it kind of voices the concerns of the Jewish people in whichever local community with respect to either human rights and democracy or the Jewish peoplehood or Israel. And we found it to be very effective, and we're able to do that at an access level, and it's very important that we do that because AJC is driven not just by the staff that work for the organization itself, but also its lay leaders who volunteer their time and their talent to AJC. And so whether it's the access board or it's kind of the older generation board that does this work, we're both operating on the same plane. It's more just about giving the opportunity for the young professionals who bring their own experience in the workforce, who bring their own value and kind of new ways of thinking to the advocacy that AJC does. And so I found it as a really great opportunity, not only to do interesting things, because I have a very particular interest in international affairs and in government, and it's really fulfilling for me to be able to do that work, especially on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people. But it's also been a real great growth opportunity for me, both in the skills that I've picked up, and I bring that back to the work that I do as an attorney here in New York, and also the personal connections that I've made. I've been able to make develop great relationships, let's say with consuls generals from other countries like India, right? So that that we can continue to build the bridges outside of just the meetings that we hold. And it's really when we create that human to human contact between people of different faiths and nationalities that we can really recognize that there's something kind of core to what we all are and what we all do. And that's that we're human beings and we're driven by a lot of the same kind of principles and desires. And again, that helps us build the bridges and build this allyship between communities.
How many people or volunteers are working actually in this level of access in the US?
In the US,
I might think that you are across the US.
Yes, we're across the US in different cities, so I can go into that as well. We have regional boards in access that are in New York, Atlanta, Chicago, other cities, where you have, let's say New York, we have about 30 people. So you can imagine for every city, there's different amounts, but in New York, we have 30 people on the Access New York board. I used to be president of Access New York, and then I'm still on Access New York, which focuses on very New York-centric issues, right? As does every other access board in other cities. They focus on the issues that are local to that city. I'm also on the Access Global board, and I'm the president of the Access Global board now. The Access Global board is a board that is around the world, not just in the US. And it has leaders from all the cities that I mentioned in the US, and other cities, but also in Paris, now also in Chile and Argentina and Brazil, really expanding into different regions of the world where you have prominent Jewish communities who are, have young professionals that are seeking an outlet for the advocacy that they want to do. And it's this kind of umbrella board that sits atop all the Axis regions and helps direct AJC's young professional work around the world and at a very kind of overarching national and global level. And so overall, there are few hundred young professionals that in one level or another are involved with AJC, whether they're on the Access board or they're what we call Marshall Society members, which are people who donate some time and talent and treasure to doing some of the activities that we do. But ultimately, if they want to join the board and become more involved, they can do that. So we're really spreading, opening our tent and making sure to bring in as many people as possible, because especially since October 7th, but even before then, there has been this yearning for by young professionals and older professionals, but from an Access standpoint, by young professionals to not just sit back and watch what's been going on, whether it's with regard to Israel in the international forums and being demonized there for defending themselves, but also the anti-Semitism that's happening, not just in one pocket in New York or Los Angeles, but it's happening in cities around the world. And so we're unified in this purpose and this experience, really. And so we're able to share with each other through our meetings that are both virtual and in person, and through our WhatsApp and constant communication, the problems that we're facing, the lessons that we learn, how to do the advocacy, what are the proper avenues to reach out to local leaders and to get help when it comes to anti-Semitism. And so it's really we're unified in strength, and so it's been great to lead the charge as of June, as president, and for years to come, I'll be involved with AJC. So it's been wonderful.
Can you share with me some of the things that you have learned I would say, in this year? Because it's very challenging all around the world. And when we see campuses in the US, I mean, and you see what's going on, and also people talking about different things. If you can share with the audience, which are the lessons that you are learning? Because learning is, it's infinity. We will always be learning. But what kind of lessons have you made progress, if I can put it in that way?
Sure. So a few lessons learned from all these experiences, both with on-campus anti-Semitism, but also out in the streets.
Yes.
One lesson learned is that this is not unique to any particular region or city. It's happening around the world and around the country. But the flip side of that lesson learned is that there's no singular unified approach to deal with that kind of common problem. It's a problem that, when you're scrolling Instagram or Twitter or whatever it may be, it seems like, and it is happening almost everywhere, right? And so you think of it as this kind of global problem that needs to be addressed globally, but it's
Yes.
actually, just as all politics is local, anti-Semitism has to be treated locally as well, meaning that the people who are actually conducting the anti-Semitic acts, whether it's on campus or in the streets, are local, and the people who would have to enforce the laws against that and help to stem that rise of anti-Semitism are local as well. And so that means that you can't have some central voice from far away dictating what people should and shouldn't be doing. You need to be engaging in the advocacy and the bridge building and allyship on the ground with local leaders with a very real understanding of what the local issues are and what may be driving all the protests and the acts of anti-Semitism. And you need to know who the power players are in order to make sure that the decisions that need to be made, the just decisions to make sure that common reason prevails and the law is enforced happens at the very local level with the campus administration, with the local police department that we actively engage with to educate them as well, with the mayor's office of whatever city it is, with local leaders of not just Jewish institutions but non-Jewish institutions as well, to again make sure that that bridge that has been built over time is used, so that there's this understanding of, we've been helping you when you needed it, and right now we need your help too, and it's time to stand up, because it's, that segues to another lesson that we've learned. A lot of this kind of happens on the fringes, and but the problem is that it's very loud voices that are on the fringes, and there is a reasonable middle that can be engaged. And the thing is that we can't forget that, because once we forget about that reasonable middle, then the reasonable middle ceases to exist. And you need that reasonable middle, as with any movement. You need a reasonable middle to stand up for those core principles, not just the Jewish community, but all those who sit right in that center, to stand up and say, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to tolerate the fringes of whatever community it is, trying to be as loud as possible and interrupt, and trying to represent what is a much more reasonable spectrum of people. So that's just to kind of give a long answer to your short question.
Got the idea. And if we move global, let's go outside of the US, and because you are the global president, what do you see outside of the US? Let's say, where are you looking in Europe? What are you looking into Latin America? Or even further, what are you looking in some Arab countries?
Yes, so that's a great question, because it's a wide range of things that we're seeing.
Yes.
Right now, when I think of Europe, from what I've been hearing from my community and access, the French elections have been very concerning, and the results of it have been very concerning. Part of the problem that we're seeing, not only with the seeming success or victory by this kind of far left coalition of different parties, but it was also, that in and of itself is an issue, right? And everything that those parties have been trying to promote and have been standing for is an issue in and of itself. But also the fact that, as I was saying before, the two strongest sets of parties are what we would call the fringes, right? The far left and the far right. And it was almost like you had to pick your poison between the two if you wanted to decide, who to vote for. And it's that center of Jewish life right in the middle, the reasonable center, that was having a really tough time saying, well, we know the issues with the far left, we know the issues with the far right. What are we supposed to do? Is there really a place for us? And so that's an ongoing discussion. It's an ongoing experience. It's not yet settled as to what will happen with French politics. And we're seeing something relatively similar, but not quite to that extreme right now in the UK, where, we've been seeing a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of protests going on. There was a recent election as well, where Labour won essentially the majority, right? And now we have a Labour prime minister there, and Sir Keir Starmer, whose opinions just, I'm no UK political expert, but he seems to be a little more reasonable and less extreme than some of the, I won't even name them, some of the other candidates from the Labour Party that have now been kind of kicked out of the Labour Party, which is a good sign, right? So again, we're still watching what that will bring. And then, thinking about Latin America as well, that's a very complicated place, because you have a healthy Jewish population there. You have a rich history there. You do also have a very significant Arab and Palestinian population, especially in Chile, right? Who knows how to advocate for itself as well, and that can create some conflicts in the public discourse in Latin America, which is why AJC did such an aggressive push into Latin America to make sure that South American Jews have the representation and also the tools that they need to engage in the advocacy and represent themselves in public. And then switching over to the Arab world, it's really a mixed bag, and very complicated, because we did see the Abraham Accords, right? And which I was so happy about and doing a lot of work in before. And the UAE still has its relationship with Israel through the Abraham Accords, and it's been somewhat kind of scaled back, at least in the public eye, because of the aftermath of October 7th. I mean, UAE during October 7th was one of the first out there, right, to condemn the attacks, and but with all the war that broke out afterwards, it's become a kind of complicated relationship, because naturally, Arab brothers and sisters in another country are being harmed by Israel, right? So, but they do see the value that the relationship with Israel brings, and so I'm hopeful that in the near future, as things hopefully get kind of scaled down, and Israel is victorious ultimately, we're able to get right back to that place, and maybe even see some sort of agreement with Saudi Arabia. That would be great. Which of course was one of the reasons why October 7th occurred, because Hamas increasingly saw itself isolated, right, with all these agreements that Israel was engaging in and about to engage in with Saudi Arabia. So it's a very complex environment, especially when you consider Yemen, which is on the other extreme. And so
Yes.
yeah, so we're watching closely, and we're doing what we can in the meantime with other countries like Morocco, and to group them with UAE as well, where the relationship is there, the history is there, and we're still doing the advocacy and bridge building through AJC to make sure that those ties are not broken by what's going on with between Israel and Hamas.
Okay. And, time has been flying, and we have been talking a lot. And let me ask you one more question: is how do you see the future as you are in this young professional division? I mean, I would like to share with the young professional divisions around the world what you guys are looking forward.
Absolutely. I'm very encouraged about the future. As October 7th and its aftermath has been devastating for the Jewish community, both in terms of the attacks themselves on Israel and then the ongoing anti-Semitism that we've seen around the world. But one thing that has really arisen out of this is this unity of the Jewish people that I've never seen in my life before. There's this concept of the human body in my mind, and I've heard this elsewhere as well, where Israel and the diaspora around the world are one part of this human body that is the Jewish people, and the attacks and the terrible death we saw on October 7th was pain that was felt not just in Israel but by Jews around the world. So when the body was attacked on one side, it felt the pain on the other side, and that pain is not isolated. And just now, as well as we see the anti-Semitism around the world, I see the anti-Semitism in another country or another city. I feel that pain, and also my Israeli relatives and friends who are in Israel see the pain that of the anti-Semitism around the world, and are feeling it themselves and are very concerned about it as well. And so, although it's pain that we're all feeling, the action and the mobilization that I've seen of the global Jewry is something that's very encouraging. And as we move forward, it's not a given. It's something that we have to continue to act on and continue to kind of foment. But this concept of global Jewish peoplehood that has been activated and enhanced in the face of everything that we've seen is something that is really encouraging to me, and I'm 100% going to devote myself to making sure that it continues to progress.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that's an important message to everyone here. So thank you very much. And again, I need to say thank you to Leel Sinai, Global President for Access, a young leader professional. And it's important because we are looking into the future. And we would like to invite all the people that watching this program, this show. You can watch us in YouTube. Also, you can follow us in Spotify. And thank you very much. And again, We'll see you in another Cafe with Cabana, sponsored by the German Jewish Museum, Santiago, Chile. Thank you very much, Leel, and see you all again.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.